Kate Mille Fáilte, which means in Gaelic 100,000 welcomes.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
History is a nightmare from which one must awaken.
Hello and welcome to Deep Diving with myself, Malachy. Can you feel it? That inner voice within your heart and your mind? Can you hear it? What is it asking you to do? During these strange and uncertain times, we may not be able to explore out there, but we can explore in here and in here. And for the purposes of people just listening to the podcast, I've pointed to my head, meaning my mind, and my chest, meaning my heart. On this deep diving podcast, I invite you to come with me on a journey into the very psyche of the Irishman and Irish woman and other people that live on the island of Ireland. We will delve into the darker side of the psyche. We will not be afraid to visit the ancient myths and folklore and ghosts that will arise as we explore the very nature of our soul. And with that in mind, I'd like to welcome my very first guest on Deep Diving, a man who is not afraid to face the dark side. It's Mr. Balor O'Brien. Balor, you're very welcome along.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, indeed. I see a man in front of me now that isn't afraid to express the innermost thoughts and dark shadows that obviously lurk within your psyche. Please explain, what is the get-up here?
I am dressing as my ancestors did and honoring the druids of the other world.
Okay. Were there any ancestors in particular you had in mind? Druids, I presume, and people who liked to cut out cardboard masks?
Absolutely not. I represent a forgotten part of Irish culture where the fairies and the other people who we came from have been forgotten, but their blood still runs in our veins. And I am making efforts to revive this and remind people of the importance of this in their lives.
When you say the fairies, what exactly do you mean?
I mean the people who exist in the other world, the world that we have closed ourselves to.
And when I think of a fairy, I think of Tinkerbell in Peter Pan, or I think of the Tooth Fairy, who brings money to children at night whilst they leave their former teeth under their pillows. But you're probably thinking of something different.
Yes, absolutely. It's the Irish folklore that we taught in school all had an origin in truth and in history. So there was great battles fought for Ireland, and there was many creatures. We had the Fomorians, we had the other people, we have had races of people from different dimensions, different worlds, because there isn't one other world. There are many kingdoms, and each one of them their memory has been soiled by our imaginations. We've crossed the stories, we've forgotten the history, and we've used them as archetypes where real people existed, real creatures, real events. We have bastardized it and turned it into something for kids.
So you mean to tell me that the likes of Darby O'Gill and the Little People wasn't exactly true?
Well, absolutely not. You should go to a fairy fort or a fairy ring on Samhain or Bealtaine with me, and we can reach out beyond the veil and you will see for yourself.
Well, that sounds like an invitation I cannot possibly refuse. Balor, the inspiration behind your essence, your character as you are now, did that happen over time, or has it happened as a result of being locked in your home for over a year?
Absolutely not. I have lived with this for my whole life. I've been surrounded by the spiritual, by the other world, by the presence. You see it every time you go to a castle or an abbey, or you pass an old ford or a rat. It is everywhere. The other world is always reaching out. Now, there are good forces and there are bad forces, but really, I suppose the danger is with what they are looking for from us, because the name Balor refers to Balor of the evil eye.
Yes, yes,
Bal-
from the Battle of Moytura. Wasn't he?
Among many, many more, yes.
Wasn't
Yes.
he like he had one eye, and let me see, he was killed by his grandson with a spear through that eye that ricocheted into his brain. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, you would. That is true. That is the story that they tell. Now, there are many families, Irish families, that have the blood of Balor running through their veins. And Balor was the greatest of the Fomorian, and his power was never exceeded by another fairy. So throughout history, throughout time, there have always been the other folk who have attempted to draw on the power of Balor's blood. And the way they do it is by accessing the blood of Irish men and women and children.
Oh my God. Quite disturbing. And these Fomorians, did they originate in Ireland or did they come from other lands?
So originally Ireland was part of their lands. Ireland was part of their universe, their kingdoms. It was one of them, and over time it was taken over by Nadini Shi, and after that by the Milesians.
Wow. So these are the different ancient tribes that have come down through the years that have more or less been forgotten about. Would that be correct in saying, or is this intentionally ignored? Do you believe this dark history that gives rise to our current state of mind?
Absolutely, there are many people who believe this, and for generations we have been told, oh, that people don't practice anymore, that people don't believe. But through my studies, I've come across time and time again people who've continued to follow practices, pagan worship, for far longer, up until modern times. But it is very unpopular to express an interest. It is very unpopular to discuss, so it gets pushed down underground. But there is evidence that there are sects and cults that still exist to this day.
Sex, as in people getting together and...
That's part of it.
Wow.
That's part of it. Absolutely.
Okay. You don't know of any functioning ones these days, do you, that one could get in touch with? Just for the experience.
I can definitely recommend someone for you.
Okay. So where do you want to take this, Balor? This really is in your hands. I know you have a deep, deep knowledge and a deep learning, and I'm sure everyone out there is very interested in learning more about this secret history that has been hidden from the Irish people for too long, and now we're going to unveil it all for them.
Yes. So I suppose what I would start with is there are stories that have been forgotten and, as I've said before, bastardized. My goal is to reveal the truth of the other world, under the title or the banner of Balor Otherworld, as
Okay.
all of these stories come from Balor as the king of, essentially the god of Irish folklore.
Was
Many
he
will paint. Yeah.
was he like the guy Sauron in Lord of the Rings, the big eye, the big fiery eye guy?
Yes, he
So
was the
Balor
inspiration
was
for that.
okay. So Balor was um, J.R.R. Tolkien's inspiration. Do you believe for so?
Absolutely. It's
Very interesting.
yeah, there's a great deal of information. Gragan's Castle in the Burren was actually where J.R.R. Tolkien stayed when he was an external examiner in NUIG.
Oh,
And near the castle, there is a cave, Golem's Cave, which many believe was inspiration for Golem and
the
his
little
cave.
character with the ring, the skinny little fella,
Yes.
and it's actually called Gollum's Cave.
Yes, it had a name previous, but yeah, they believe that was inspiration, and you can visit
Surely
the
they
cave
should.
today.
Surely they could sue. No, the estate of Tolkien.
Well, they can try.
Yeah. Okay. Well, worth looking into. Worth looking into. That's another day's work. Please continue. Balor.
So a great deal more. J.R. Tolkien was very fascinated with Ireland because of his connection with C.S. Lewis, who wrote Narnia. He was greatly inspired by the Irish landscape and folklore, and it again was something that contributed to the Narnia mythology. So, and when J.R.R. Tolkien visited, in all likelihood, he drew his inspiration for Sauron from Balor, who ruled from Donegal, and he had poison in his eye from his father had druids making potions, and he leaned over the cauldron and the fumes entered his eye. When the fumes entered his eye, they caused an unfortunate incident where he was required to keep it sealed forevermore unless he wanted to destroy anything he gazed upon.
A bit like this, then.
Absolutely. Yep, you have it.
So, looking out of one eye, do you think that this arose in him an inward journey of his own psyche that he wanted to reflect through the eye outwards onto the Irish people or the Fomorian people at the time?
When he went to battle, when he removed that eye, or the cover for his eye to protect, when he opened that eye, he devastated whole armies. He destroyed all of his opponents with that,
Goodness.
with the power of that eye. He could shoot fire and destruction from that eye.
A very, very dangerous man. And he met his demise through a battle against the Tuatha De Danann leader at the time, I believe. Was that the case? His grandson?
Yes, the story goes that there was a prophecy that his grandson would be the one to kill him. So his daughter, to stop her having children, he kept her contained in a crystal tower, and she had 50 handmaidens. And obviously his plan didn't work because she did give birth to Lug, and Lug was raised by Manannán, god of the sea, and he was trained and he was given the weapons of Manannán, and one of them included the spear which he used against Balor.
My goodness. So Lug killed Balor with his spear.
Yes. What people don't realize is Lug is portrayed as the hero of the story, the hero. Balor is always portrayed as the villain. But I am putting forward the reality that Balor actually was lured into war by Lug, that Lug actually craved power, and in order to usurp his grandfather, he basically caused an incident where the eyepiece covering the eye was damaged, and Balor inadvertently decimated several senior leaders of other kingdoms during a meeting. And as a result of this, he started a war among the kingdoms.
My goodness, my goodness. And just as you said that, there was some interference. I wonder, is that some psychic energy trying to stop you from telling the truth of this story?
It wouldn't be the first time.
There's been interference before.
Indeed. Over in, we've had it before when I visited Biddy Early and her home, when I visited castles and abbeys. I have had that same interference with technology, and you can feel the presence in the air.
So you just had no reception in the field you were in? Is that the because that happens to me sometimes when I go for walks. I lose the I can't get the proper internet connection if I want to look at something.
Well, you can, as I say, you're more than welcome to come with me on my next excursion, and you can see for yourself.
I certainly will. I certainly will. Biddy Early. Now, this is a character I've heard of in my youth. Again, not one that was really explained properly in my school days. We learned more about St. Patrick and the Stakes and all the other malarkey that you would hear on the mainstream of Irish legend, folk, and fairy tale. Please tell me more about Biddy Early.
Well, the first thing to know is she was a real person. Many people have misremembered or been mistold details about her life. The most popular one is that she cursed the Clare hurling team, but they have her birth certificate, they have her death certificate, and she was dead before the formation of the GAA. So the story of her cursing the GAA team is actually false.
So the GAA team used that as an excuse for being useless.
There is another story about a priest that two of the players left early, and when the priest turned from the pulpit,
they left. Sorry, they left early, or they left early, not they left Biddy early. Just to clear that up. Just there are,
they left prematurely from mass. And
prematurely from mass. Thank you. Just to clear it up. Thank you.
And then when they were leaving, the priest turned to face the congregation, and he saw them leaving, and he said, "You may win the All Ireland today, but for 80 years you won't win another."
My goodness, my goodness. And the same excuse is used in Mayo as well, but I don't think they'll ever win one, to be fair to them. So Biddy Early existed before the formation of the GAA. What's so good about Biddy Early?
She was a remarkable woman for her time because she faced adversity from every kind of authority you could imagine. I suppose she was a very strong personality, and she came from a line of herbalists and healers. When she was 16, both of her parents died, and she had been trained by her mother as a herbalist, but she was considered a very strange girl who spoke with the fairies or was away with the fairies, and she didn't really have a support around her. I think the story of her often gets undermined a lot. I think she was she deserves far more credit for how strong she was, because she went to live with some relatives in the Burren. And during that time, the only references I can get for why she left was that there was some issue with the woman of the house. Now, there are accounts of how Biddy was a very beautiful woman. So it seems that throughout her life, she faced prejudice because of her looks and also because of her free thinking spirit. She was evicted from properties for disputing an increase in rent. She ultimately, I would say the first 25, 30 years of her life formulated the woman that we know in stories of her later life, where she defied the church, she defied the police, she defied the landlords, the doctors, the priest. Everybody was out to get her because she wielded great influence, because she had the respect of the lower class people, the people who didn't have money for the doctor. They didn't have when there was no other solution, she was there for the people, and they respected her and they responded to that. And as I say, priests and doctors and the authorities, they did not like anyone wielding that kind of influence. So they used every means at their disposal to undermine her. And it got to the point where they actually raised a charge of witchcraft against her. And she had to attend court in her 60s in Ennis. And no witnesses came forward, and she was released without charge. But throughout her life, time and time again, she faced this kind of prejudice. For someone to raise, I think the law was 500 years old when they were tried to use it in that case against her. For them to be going to those lengths to contain her shows just how powerful she was in the community at the time.
A legend, as it were. Do we have any photographic or pictures of Biddy Early, just so we could share them with people to show her beauty and see if there's anything you could garner in terms of her essence from those pictures?
I don't have any at the moment with me, but
we can get our hands on them. Just in terms of how do you feel she looks like when you shut your eyes and you imagine Biddy Early and her herbs? What images are conjured up in your mind's eye?
She was known to be a redhead, and as I say, I suppose the descriptions were all that she was very beautiful, or there was some people suggested that she used potions, love potions, to make men fall in love with her. She had husbands throughout her life. She had 4 husbands. Ooh. And there was
go on.
Well, I think we'll leave the rest to your imagination, Malachy.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Sounds like a keeper. She was stealing women's husbands right across the land. No wonder she was hated. Anywho, we'll move on. What other story would you like to cover tonight, Balor? I would like to remind people that we will have Balor back in the future. There is so much territory to cover inwardly and outwardly in terms of the folklore. But I like the idea of ourselves escaping into the imagination and searching for something deeper, something that's connected to the land, and bringing that up and really enjoying the views. Balor, another story, please.
So a change in pace, I suppose, for you would be to tell the story of the savage pigs of Tulla.
Ah, now you're talking.
So this is another tale set or based in Clare, and
actually, do you mind if I just need to pour myself a stiff drink? Is that okay? You can continue here. You don't need me nodding along. I'll be back in 1 or 2 moments. Okay, if you want to continue for the people. See you soon.
So the story is that there was a farmer in East Clare, and he had a very, very strong I suppose he was a very foolish man, and his wife was a very wise man. Well, maybe she was a man. There was a man in East Clare, and he needed to sell his pigs, and now he was a very poor man, so it was critical that he sold the last 2 pigs at the market in Tulla. And when he set out to do so, his wife was very, very emphatic that he shouldn't drink the money away, and to make sure that he sold them for the best price possible. He struggled a little bit because people were making fun of him that the pigs were skinny enough to be sold as hounds, wolves, or as hounds. And throughout the day, he became increasingly agitated. And in the end, he used what little money he had to go to the pub and drink. Basically, when he was properly, when he's had his fill, he stumbled back to the cart where he had left the pigs, and he hopped in and he started off on the journey home. Now, the pigs hadn't been fed all day, and he was incredibly drunk. So he actually just dozed off while he was in the cart, and he fell backwards into I suppose into where the pigs were. And the moment he fell in, the pigs took it upon themselves to eat him, basically, as they hadn't eaten all day. So they devoured him, and they were then later killed and buried in Tulla graveyard, which is on top of the hill in the town.
Oh, how did that go? Was it good?
Well, I was just finishing up, so
Cheers,
you
old
can-
boy. Always drink responsibly, eh? So the pigs, you finished that story, have you?
yeah, the pigs ended up being buried in the
Wonderful.
consecrated ground, and the headstone is
Scary.
there to this day.
Scary, scary, scary. Another story for us, Balor?
I have one that I came across recently that it surprised me. It hasn't been told more widely.
Yes.
It's
Do
the
tell. Do tell.
in Drumcliff Cemetery, just outside Ennis. The old cemetery, there was a body buried, a former mayor of Limerick. And there was a report in the 1850s, I believe it was, that the body had been dug up and that the fat had been removed from the body. Now, the police investigation, they never found out.
The fat had been removed from the body. What do you mean?
So the fat had been removed from the intestines and around the stomach.
And everything left behind.
The organs were left behind. Just the fat was taken.
Well, that's weird.
There was again this underground pagan beliefs that have persisted, and at the time there was belief among the poor of this thing called the hand of glory, where if you desecrated a body that was buried on consecrated ground and made a candle out of the fat, when you lit it, you would be invisible, so to enter people's homes and rob them. And another story is that you couldn't be harmed while you lit the candle. So again, there are variations in what powers it you were.
So you're telling me that there were a group of people in, where was it?
Ennis.
In Ennis, that dug up a body, removed the fat to make a candle so they would be invisible to rob houses. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this is true?
So this is the closest theory that could be put forward, as in they never identified who did it, but it was done on Bealtaine, so it was discovered 2 days later. But based on witnesses at the cemetery, the only time it could have been done would have been on the night of Bealtaine, which was one of the 4 pagan holidays, where the links between our world and the other world are strongest, and creatures and people can pass from one to the other.
So you believe the creatures did this to make candles for people to rob houses?
Well, it's possible. That's also a possibility. Far more likely, people did it themselves. The large stone they estimated would have taken 5 to 7 people to remove. In order to do the work, it would have taken at least 5 to 7 people. So it's particularly strange that there was no witnesses and that there was no one, I suppose, that was identified as a suspect based on the fact that there would have been more than one person involved. You know, there would have been a number of people who,
of course,
who could,
to extract the fat from the organs and whatnot.
and they never found the candle, if they made it into a candle or not.
Wow. An expensive candle beats Gwyneth Paltrow any day, eh? The smelly candles she has. Right. So the secret, there was a secret sect in Ennis. Do you think these sects, SECTS, not the other one, are still around today? Should we be worried?
I don't know if you'd be worried, but I'm sure they still exist. There's a wide range of stories around the town that throughout the years have gone unexplained. In the late 1890s, they discovered in the Ennis Abbey a petrified cat inside the walls of the building. And again, this appeared to be some sort of ritual. They basically put a cat in. It's unclear whether it was dead or alive. We assume and hope it was deceased from natural causes when it was placed there, but it appears it was done as a kind of a spell or as a ritual, either to keep evil in and contain it, or to keep evil out. But again, it's unclear because many of these instances remain so poorly reported on, and there's so little information. All you can do is go back and study basically what people believed, particularly what poor people believed, what was considered the lower classes believed, and the pagan rituals that they carried for thousands of years.
Okay.
Because that is where the secrets will come from, and that is their link to the other world, and it's their link to Balor and the Fomorians and Nadini Shi. All of those connections, they were such an impact. They made such an impact that for generations, going for thousands of years, these practices have continued.
There was a break in that pattern, though, wasn't there, in the last 100 to 200 years with the onslaught of scientific endeavor and the Enlightenment? Do you think that from a scientific point of view that believes in a materialist, scientismist world, that it completely disdains, ignores, and laughs at the type of world you're talking about, the deep psyche, spiritual cosmos that we're all connected to? What have you got to say about that? Have we lost a connection? And is now the time to reconnect with that world?
Now more than ever, because we've drifted further apart for for hundreds of years, but in the last number of decades, people don't even know their history. People don't know what we believed, what we were connected to. People aren't connected. Even if people don't want to believe in the other world, people aren't connected to the natural world. We're so reliant on technology for everything that we're incapable of communication without it. Even myself, I'm driven to it here on Zoom or on video chats, because
and for that
there is no other way.
I do apologize, because my telepathic skills aren't up to your level, and it would be probably pointless, really, because nobody else would be able to hear our conversation if we did all this telepathically. So in that respect, we are thankful for the technology, for the internet in terms of getting the word out. But definitely you would encourage, and I would encourage many people looking and listening to this podcast to reconnect with nature. Just go out into a field or into a park, whatever is closest to you, and look at a flower, smell the flower, and breathe. It's so important, isn't it, Balor?
People need to get reconnected with their roots before it's too late.
And that's why we are beginning a journey here on Deep Diving with Malachy Murray. And my very first guest, Balor O'Brien, I have to say thank you very, very much, sir, for bringing so much information and knowledge to the masses. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for this week on Deep Diving with Malachy Murray. Join me again soon when I'll be talking to more knowledgeable guests about stuff.